जो मानव जीवन एवं इस सृष्टि के विकास से जुड़े हुए। आज के इस सम्मेलन का विषय आधारभूत विज्ञान के प्रति रुचि का पुनर्सृजन। विज्ञान की महत्ता को समझते हुए बिहार विज्ञान सम्मेलन का आयोजन किया जाता है। बिहार की मिट्टी अनेक प्रतिभाओं से सिंचित है और यह मंच ऊर्जावान प्रतिभाओं को नया अवसर प्रदान करता है। आज का यह कार्यक्रम और भी विशेष इसलिए बन गया है क्योंकि आज बिहार के गौरव भारत के प्रथम राष्ट्रपति डॉक्टर राजेंद्र प्रसाद जी की जयंती बिहार सरकार 30 दिसंबर का दिन मेधा दिवस के रूप में मनाती है। अतः आज का यह दिन प्रतिभाशाली व्यक्तित्व के सम्मान को समर्पित है। एक बार पुनः आप सभी का 8वें बिहार विज्ञान सम्मेलन में जुड़ने के लिए हार्दिक आभार एवं अभिनंदन।
जन गण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता। पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा। विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा। तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे। गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता। जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे।
देवो भव। भारतीय संस्कृति में अतिथि को देव तुल्य कहा गया, अतः सर्वप्रथम अतिथि सत्कार। इसके लिए मैं पटना विश्वविद्यालय के माननीय कुलपति प्रोफेसर गिरीश कुमार चौधरी जी से आग्रह करूंगी कि वो महामहिम का अतिथि सत्कार करें, उन्हें सम्मानित करें। हिंदी कवि श्री जयशंकर प्रसाद ने कहा है, हमारे सच्चे में खदान अतिथि थे सदा हमारे देव। हमारा सौभाग्य है कि महामहिम के अतिथि सत्कार का अवसर हमें मिला है। अब मैं आग्रह करूंगी कि माननीय प्रतिकुलपति पटना विश्वविद्यालय प्रधान सचिव श्री चैतन्य प्रसाद जी का अतिथि सत्कार करें। एक दूसरे का सम्मान करना, आदर करना, यह एक मुद्दा है जो मानवता की कई पीढ़ियों को सौहार्द की कड़ियों से जोड़कर संजोकर रखता है। अब मैं सम्मेलन के मुख्य अतिथि महामहिम माननीय राज्यपाल महोदय एवं विशिष्ट अतिथिगण से आग्रह करूंगी कि स्मारिका विमोचन करें। आधारभूत विज्ञान के प्रति रुचि का पुनर्सृजन करना, ज्ञान के दीपक को जलाना इस बिहार विज्ञान सम्मेलन का उद्देश्य है। शोध ज्ञान का द्योतक है, एक संभावित शक्ति है जो मानव व्यवहार के 3 मुख्य स्रोतों को सिंचित करता है: इच्छा, लगन और भावना। कार्यक्रम को आगे बढ़ाते हुए मैं आमंत्रित करना चाहूंगी ललित नारायण मिथिला विश्वविद्यालय की प्रति कुलपति प्रोफेसर डॉले सिन्हा जी को कि वो स्वागत भाषण दें। कार्यक्रम को आगे बढ़ाते हुए मैं स्वागत भाषण के लिए हमसे जुड़ी ललित नारायण मिथिला विश्वविद्यालय की प्रति कुलपति प्रोफेसर डॉली सिन्हा जी से आग्रह करूंगी। मैम प्लीज आप माइक अनम्यूट करें। मैम प्लीज माइक अनम्यूट करें।
Am I audible now? Hello?
जी जी जी
हाँ, नमस्कार। Very good morning to all. महामहिम कुलाधिपति श्री फागु चौहान जी, प्रोफेसर अनिल ककोदकर जी, प्रोफेसर प्रभात रंजन जी, पटना विश्वविद्यालय के कुलपति प्रोफेसर गिरीश कुमार चौधरी जी, प्रति कुलपति प्रोफेसर अजय कुमार सिंह, बिहार ब्रेन्स डेवलपमेंट सोसाइटी के अध्यक्ष श्री विभूति विक्रमादित्य, इस संगोष्ठी के संयोजक डॉक्टर वीरेंद्र प्रसाद एवं डॉक्टर परिमल कुमार खान तथा सभी विशिष्ट जनों का मैं आदर के साथ स्वागत करती हूँ। 8वें बिहार साइंस कॉन्फ्रेंस का ये 3 दिवसीय अंतर्राष्ट्रीय संगोष्ठी पटना विश्वविद्यालय एवं बिहार ब्रेन्स डेवलपमेंट सोसाइटी के संयुक्त तत्वावधान में आयोजित है। इस अवसर पर बिहार के महामहिम राज्यपाल सह विश्वविद्यालयों के कुलाधिपति माननीय श्री फागु चौहान जी की कृपापूर्ण उपस्थिति से हम सभी अभिभूत हैं। आप एक सशक्त राजनीतिक रच चुके हैं। पूर्व में आपने उत्तर प्रदेश के घोसी विधानसभा निर्वाचन क्षेत्र से रिकॉर्ड 6 बार विधायक रह चुके हैं। आप बिहार में समावेशी विकास के लिए प्रतिबद्ध हैं। बिहार में उच्च शिक्षा के क्षेत्र में सकारात्मक परिवर्तन के लिए आप लगातार कार्यरत हैं। इस संगोष्ठी के लिए आपसे प्राप्त प्रोत्साहन से हमारा मनोबल बढ़ा है। इस मंच पर ससम्मान आपका मैं स्वागत करती हूँ। इस त्रिदिवसीय संगोष्ठी के बीच वक्ता सुप्रसिद्ध परमाणु वैज्ञानिक प्रोफेसर अनिल ककोदकर जी हैं। आप परमाणु ऊर्जा आयोग के अध्यक्ष एवं भारत सरकार के सचिव थे। इससे पूर्व आप भाभा परमाणु अनुसंधान केंद्र के निदेशक भी रह चुके हैं। आपके नेतृत्व में भारत परमाणु ऊर्जा विकास के क्षेत्र में कई कीर्तिमान स्थापित किया है। आप स्वच्छ ऊर्जा के उत्पादन एवं व्यवहार के पक्षधर हैं। आप अनेक पुरस्कारों से सम्मानित हैं। आप पद्मश्री, पद्म भूषण एवं पद्म विभूषण प्राप्त हैं। संगोष्ठी तथा बिहार में शिक्षा एवं विज्ञान से जुड़े सभी सुधीजनों की ओर से आपका सादर स्वागत एवं अभिनंदन है। बिहार साइंस कॉन्फ्रेंस सामान्य जनों के बीच ज्ञान विज्ञान के प्रचार प्रसार का कार्य नवोन्मेष या इनोवेशन पर बल देता है। विज्ञान की जन पक्षधरता से ही समावेशी विकास संभव होता है। बिहार जैसे प्रांत में विज्ञान की ये जन पक्षधरता मूलगामी बदलाव ला सकती है। कॉन्फ्रेंस के माध्यम से हम अंतिम पायदान के लोगों तक जुड़ना चाहते हैं। इसलिए ये कॉन्फ्रेंस हर साल अलग अलग जगह पर मनाया जाता है। पूर्व में संगोष्ठी पटना से बाहर मुजफ्फरपुर तथा गया में भी आयोजित किया जा चुका है। सभी संगोष्ठियों में कई विशिष्ट वैज्ञानिकों ने अपना योगदान दिया। गया में भारत गणराज्य के पूर्व राष्ट्रपति भारत रत्न प्रोफेसर APJ कलाम का सस्नेह और प्रेरणादायी उपस्थिति से हम सभी धन्य हुए थे। इस अंतर्राष्ट्रीय कॉन्फ्रेंस में भारत एवं कई देश से 200 विशिष्ट वैज्ञानिकों, शिक्षकों, अन्वेषकों एवं छात्रगण हमारे साथ जुड़ रहे हैं। हमारे बीच प्रोफेसर प्रभात रंजन जी भी हैं। एक बार फिर से आप सभी का हार्दिक स्वागत एवं अभिनंदन है। इस अंतर्राष्ट्रीय कॉन्फ्रेंस का विमर्श निश्चित रूप से एक सार्थक निष्कर्ष प्रस्तुत करेगा। आप सबों का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद और आभार। धन्यवाद। जय विज्ञान, जय हिंद।
धन्यवाद मैडम। बी ब्रेक के चेयरमैन श्री विभूति विक्रमादित्य जी से अनुरोध करूंगी कि वे 8वें बिहार विज्ञान सम्मेलन के विषय वस्तु से हमें अवगत कराएं।
आदरणीय महामहिम एवं कुलाधिपति श्री फागू चौहान जी, भारत के महान आण्विक वैज्ञानिक डॉक्टर अनिल काकोडकर जी, प्रिंसिपल सेक्रेटरी श्री जितेंद्र प्रसाद जी, पटना विश्वविद्यालय के कुलपति श्री गिरीश कुमार चौधरी जी, पटना विश्वविद्यालय के उप कुलपति श्री अजय कुमार सिंह जी, मिथिला विश्वविद्यालय के उप कुलपति एवं राष्ट्रीय सम्मेलन के चेयरपर्सन प्रोफेसर डॉली सिन्हा जी, इस कार्यक्रम के संयोजक श्री वीरेंद्र प्रसाद जी, संयोजक सचिव श्री प्रोफेसर परिमल खान जी, देश विदेश से इस सम्मेलन में जुड़े वैज्ञानिक, प्रोफेसर, युवा वैज्ञानिक, उपस्थित मीडियाकर्मियों एवं राजभवन के सभी कर्मचारीगण। बिहार साइंस कॉन्फ्रेंस की शुरुआत 2008 में मेरे ही द्वारा बिहार के वैज्ञानिकों के सहयोग से इस भारत के विभिन्न कोने एवं विश्व के बहुत से देशों में जो लोग बसे हैं उनके द्वारा की थी और उसी समय बिहार बेस सोसाइटी की स्थापना हुई थी। इस आयोजन की में यह पहला आयोजन भी पटना विश्वविद्यालय में ही हुआ था। यह अंतर्राष्ट्रीय सम्मेलन भारतीय राष्ट्रीय कांग्रेस के तर्ज पर हर वर्ष बिहार के विभिन्न कॉलेजों एवं विश्वविद्यालयों में होता है। हर वर्ष करीब 500 प्रतिभागी इस महासम्मेलन में भाग लेते हैं। इस वर्ष पटना विश्वविद्यालय के नेतृत्व में भी हमारी सोसाइटी ने बिहार देश सोसाइटी जिसे बिहार देश के नाम से भी जाना जाता है, ने इस सम्मेलन का आयोजन किया है। कोविड-19 महामारी के बहुत सारी बाधाओं एवं नियमों के कारण इस कार्यक्रम को ऑनलाइन ही आयोजन करने का फैसला किया गया है। पटना विश्वविद्यालय की टीम को मैं कोटि से धन्यवाद देता हूँ कि इस और महामहिम की उपस्थिति एवं आशीर्वाद से गदगद हूँ। साथ ही साथ डॉक्टर काकोडकर के इस सम्मेलन में के 8वीं सीरीज में आने से गौरवान्वित हूँ। बिहार विज्ञान एवं प्रौद्योगिकी एक प्रगतिशील समाज के दो पहिए हैं, जबकि बुनियादी विज्ञान में अनुसंधान प्रौद्योगिकी के विकास को लाता है। प्रौद्योगिकी के विकास विज्ञान के विविध क्षेत्रों में इनपुट से जोड़ते हैं। बुनियादी विज्ञान प्रौद्योगिकी का स्रोत है, लेकिन यह खेद की बात है कि वर्तमान में भौतिक विज्ञान, रसायन विज्ञान, गणित एवं जीव विज्ञान जैसे बुनियादी विज्ञान छात्रों को उनके पाठ्यक्रमों से रुचि कम कर रही है। यदि यह प्रवृत्ति जारी रहती है तो यह सभी क्षेत्रों में राष्ट्र एवं दुनिया को के विकास को बाधित करेगा, जिसमें तकनीकी मोर्चा भी शामिल है। इसलिए इसी प्रवृत्ति और इसके भविष्य में निहितार्थों के विभिन्न कारणों पर प्रकाश डालना आवश्यक है। मेरे विचार में बुनियादी विज्ञान जिज्ञासा से प्रेरित है, लेकिन अप्लाइड विज्ञान विशिष्ट सवालों के जवाब देने के लिए डिजाइन किया गया है। मेरा तर्क यह है कि जिज्ञासा से प्रेरित मौलिक ज्ञान की खोज इतनी ही उपयोगी है जितनी विशिष्ट समस्याओं के समाधान की खोज। जिन कारणों से हमारे पास अब अव्यवहारिक कंप्यूटर है एवं 100 साल पहले हमारे पास नहीं था, उनके पास नहीं था। इस बीच ऐसा नहीं है कि हमने कंप्यूटर की आवश्यकता की खोज की है। यह मौलिक भौतिकी के खोजों के कारण ही हुआ है जो आधुनिक इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स, गणितीय तर्क के विकास एवं 1930 के दशक में परमाणु भौतिक विधियों की आवश्यकता को गिनती के तरीके के विकसित करने के लिए ही किया था। हम कई उदाहरणों का हवाला दे सकते हैं जो मौलिक अनुसंधान के व्यवहारिक एवं आर्थिक महत्व को प्रदर्शित करते हैं। अधिकांश शुद्ध शोधों के फलस्वरूप ऐसे लोगों या संगठनों द्वारा वित्त पोषित किया जाता है, जिसके परिणाम में कोई व्यावसायिक रुचि नहीं होती, जो कि इस तरह के वित्त पोषण की के लिए निरंतर आवश्यक है। मुझे लगता है कि महान वैज्ञानिकों द्वारा महान खोजों का संघर्ष एवं युवा दिमाग तक पहुंचना चाहिए। इस बेसिक साइंस कोर्स के प्रति अधिक रुचि तभी बढ़ेगी, लंबे काल में हमारा देश लाभान्वित होगा। अब हम अपनी जिम्मेदारी शिक्षकों, अभिभावकों, शिक्षकों, एवं मीडिया कर्मियों के लिए बुनियादी विज्ञान की शिक्षा के क्षेत्र में स्थिति पर चर्चा करने के लिए समाधान को देने का समय है। मुझे पूर्ण आशा है इस मुद्दे पर सम्मेलन में विस्तार से चर्चा की जाएगी। मैं आज उन सभी का शुक्रिया अदा करता हूँ जो इस मेगा इवेंट में आयोजन करने के लिए विभिन्न चरणों में प्रत्यक्ष या अप्रत्यक्ष रूप से बहुत योगदान दिया है। आप सभी को 2020 की अपनी शुभकामनाएं। धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद सर। अब मैं पटना विश्वविद्यालय के माननीय कुलपति श्री गिरीश कुमार चौधरी जी से आग्रह करूंगी कि वो इस विज्ञान सम्मेलन से जुड़े लोगों को संबोधित करें।
महामहिम राज्यपाल सह कुलाधिपति महोदय श्री फागू चौहान जी, अंतर्राष्ट्रीय ख्याति प्राप्त वैज्ञानिक डॉक्टर अनिल काकोडकर जी, प्रधान सचिव श्री चैतन्य प्रसाद जी, पटना विश्वविद्यालय के प्रति कुलपति प्रोफेसर अजय कुमार सिंह जी, ललित नारायण मिश्रा विश्वविद्यालय के प्रति कुलपति डॉली सिन्हा जी, आमंत्रित विशेषज्ञगण, आयोजक मंडल के सदस्यगण तथा प्रतिभागीगण। इसमें दो कि आज हम विज्ञान और तकनीकी के क्षेत्र में अग्रणी देशों में से हैं। 1947 में हमारा देश जहां विज्ञान के क्षेत्र में था और आज आसमान जमीन का फर्क है। आज इसी विज्ञान और तकनीकी की देन है कि हम लोग ये ऑनलाइन कॉन्फ्रेंस कर रहे हैं। मैं 8वें विज्ञान सम्मेलन के उद्घाटन समारोह में आप सबों का पटना विश्वविद्यालय परिवार की तरफ से हार्दिक अभिनंदन एवं स्वागत करता हूं। दिसंबर 3 से 5, 2000 तक चलने वाले इस 3 दिवसीय कार्यक्रम का आयोजन पटना विश्वविद्यालय द्वारा किया जा रहा है। इसमें हमारे सहयोगी हैं डी ब्रेन्स डेवलपमेंट सोसाइटी पटना और विमर्श का विषय है आधारभूत विज्ञान के प्रति रुचि का पुनर्सृजन। बिहार विज्ञान सम्मेलन का आयोजन ऑनलाइन पद्धति से 4 समानांतर अधिवेशनों में किया जा रहा है। इस आयोजन के मुख्य वक्ता अंतर्राष्ट्रीय ख्याति प्राप्त वैज्ञानिक डॉक्टर अनिल काकोडकर जी, जिन्हें भारत सरकार द्वारा पद्म विभूषण से सम्मानित किया गया है। सम्मेलन में देश विदेश के अपने क्षेत्र में अग्रणी वैज्ञानिकों का संभाषण होगा तथा युवा वैज्ञानिक एवं शोधार्थी अपने शोध पत्र प्रस्तुत करेंगे। यह सम्मेलन विज्ञान के विभिन्न क्षेत्रों में कार्यरत विभाग के विश्वविद्यालय एवं उच्च शिक्षा के संस्थानों के शिक्षकों, वैज्ञानिकों एवं छात्रों को विमर्श का एक मंच प्रदान करेगा। साथ ही उन्हें देश विदेश के वरिष्ठ वैज्ञानिकों से जुड़ने का अवसर मिलेगा, जिससे उनके बीच पारंपरिक सहयोग का दायरा बढ़ेगा। प्रतिभागीगण विज्ञान के क्षेत्र में हो रही नई प्रगतियों एवं जानकारियों से रूबरू होंगे। इस अवसर पर हमें यह जानकारी देते हुए अपार खुशी हो रही है कि हाल ही में पटना विश्वविद्यालय को एक उच्च स्तर के शोध केंद्र की स्थापना हेतु रूसा से ग्रांट प्राप्त हुआ, जो आधुनिक उपकरणों से सुसज्जित होगा। इस शोध केंद्र में बिहार के सभी विश्वविद्यालयों में कार्यरत शिक्षकों एवं शोधार्थियों को शोध कार्य की सुविधा प्रदान की जाएगी। यह भी बताते हुए हमें खुशी हो रही है कि साइंस रिसर्च सेंटर का भवन बन चुका है। उसमें जो फर्नीचर्स और इक्विपमेंट परचेज करने का प्रोसेस चल रहा है। डॉल्फिन रिसर्च सेंटर भी बनाया जा रहा है, जिसका की उद्घाटन हमारे माननीय मुख्यमंत्री जी कर चुके हैं। हमें इस बात की खुशी भी है कि पटना विश्वविद्यालय को महामहिम श्री फागू चौहान जी एवं बिहार के माननीय मुख्यमंत्री श्री नीतीश कुमार जी का आशीर्वाद मिलता रहा। आशा है कि विज्ञान की युवा पीढ़ी इस सम्मेलन से लाभान्वित होंगी तथा यह सम्मेलन बिहार के उच्च शिक्षा के संस्थान में वैज्ञानिक शोध को एक नई ऊर्जा प्रदान करेगा।
धन्यवाद सर। अब मैं महामहिम कुलाधिपति महोदय से सादर अनुरोध करती हूँ कि इस सम्मेलन के सफल संचालन हेतु आशीर्वचनों से हमारा मार्ग प्रदर्शन
करें। बिहार विज्ञान सम्मेलन के उद्घाटन समारोह में उपस्थित पटना विश्वविद्यालय के कुलपति डॉक्टर दिलीप कुमार चौधरी जी, प्रधान सचिव श्री चैतन्य प्रसाद जी, मुख्य वक्ता महान वैज्ञानिक जी, कुल सचिव मनोज मिश्रा जी, आयोजन समिति के सदस्यगण, आमंत्रित विशेष विशेषज्ञगण, प्रतिभागीगण, मीडिया प्रतिनिधिगण, देवियों एवं सज्जनों, आप सभी अवगत हैं कि आज भारत के प्रथम राष्ट्रपति देशरत्न डॉक्टर राजेंद्र प्रसाद जी का जयंती है। बिहार के सच्चे सपूत और भारतीय महामानव डॉक्टर राजेंद्र प्रसाद जी को आज मैं अपना नमन निवेदन करता हूँ। पूज्य राजेंद्र बाबू जी की जयंती के पावन दिवस पर पटना विश्वविद्यालय द्वारा बिहार विज्ञान सम्मेलन का आयोजन सार्थक निर्णय। आज बिहार विज्ञान सम्मेलन के अवसर पर ऑनलाइन रूप में आयोजित इस अंतर्राष्ट्रीय कार्यक्रम में आप सभी को मैं बधाइयां एवं शुभकामनाएं देता हूँ। यह बहुत प्रसन्नता एवं संतोष का विषय है कि पटना विश्वविद्यालय ने इस सम्मेलन का आयोजन कर अपनी गरिमामयी परंपरा में आज एक और अध्याय जोड़ा है। आज के सम्मेलन के विमर्श का विषय है आधारभूत विज्ञान के प्रति रुचि का पुनर्सृजन। यह विषय अत्यंत सामयिक एवं ज्वलंत है। आधुनिक विश्व को नई पहचान निश्चय ही विज्ञान ने दी है, पर यह भी एक सच्चाई है कि वैज्ञानिक विकास की इस दौर में विज्ञान के आधारभूत पक्ष पीछे छूट गए हैं और व्यापक मानवीय कल्याण की भावनाएं भी कमजोर पड़ गई हैं। दरअसल हमें विज्ञान के आधारभूत पक्षों और व्यापक मानवीय संदर्भों पर भी चिंतन करना चाहिए और उनके प्रति अपनी रुचि जगानी चाहिए। हमें इस सम्मेलन में इस विषय पर विचार करना है कि कैसे हम अपनी रुचि का परिष्कार करते हुए वैज्ञानिक चिंतन और शोध विश्व मानवता के लिए उपयोगी कल्याणकारी बना सकते हैं। इस महत्वपूर्ण विषय पर समय रहते सचेत और सतर्क होना और अंतर्राष्ट्रीय पटल वैज्ञानिकों को इस विमर्श में सम्मिलित होना एक बहुत ही शुभ संकेत है। आशा है कि सम्मेलन निश्चय ही विज्ञान के क्षेत्र में भरपूर अभिरुचि रखने वाली प्रतिभा संपन्न युवा पीढ़ी की एक नई ऊर्जा और प्रखर सोच प्रदान करेगा, जिससे वैज्ञानिक चिंतन, शोध और आविष्कारों को नई स्वस्थ दिशा और दृष्टि मिलेगी। पटना विश्वविद्यालय के विज्ञान के क्षेत्र में शुरू से एक नई सोच और अभिनवता का तरजीह दिए। अपने 103 वर्षों के इतिहास में इस विश्वविद्यालय ने विज्ञान, चिकित्सा, अभियंत्रण भी, नई कला, दर्शन और साहित्य के क्षेत्र में भी एक अवसर विख्यात अर्जित की है। इस आयोजन में वैज्ञानिकों, शिक्षकों, शोधार्थियों और छात्रों उत्साहपूर्ण प्रतिभागिता से विश्वविद्यालय विज्ञान शिक्षा की उपलब्धियों में भी एक नया अध्याय हुएगा। पूर्व में आयोजित बिहार विज्ञान सम्मेलन में पूर्व राष्ट्रपति डॉक्टर APJ अब्दुल कलाम और डॉक्टर R.K. पचौरी, प्रोफेसर यशपाल, प्रोफेसर MS स्वामीनाथन, डॉक्टर सौरभ पाल जैसे विश्व प्रसिद्ध वैज्ञानिक एवं शिक्षाविदों की गरिमापूर्ण उपस्थिति एवं मार्गदर्शन से हम अत्यंत लाभान्वित हुए। इस बार भी डॉक्टर अनिल काकोडकर जैसे वैज्ञानिक का इस सम्मेलन में जुड़ना हमारी विशेष उपलब्धि है, जिससे ये वक्ता के रूप में महान भौतिक वैज्ञानिक डॉक्टर काकोडकर जी के संबोधन से हमारी वैज्ञानिक सोच एक नई दिशा मिली। वैश्विक महामारी कोरोना फिलहाल जीवन और जगत हर क्षेत्र में प्रभावित हुआ है। इस कारण यह सम्मेलन विलंब से ही आयोजित हुआ है और इस महामारी के संकट में हमें नए विकल्प अपनाने की भी कई ऑफर दिए हैं। हम आज ऑनलाइन जुड़कर अपने विद्यालय महाविद्यालयों की कक्षाओं आयोजित कर रहे हैं। वेबिनार से जुड़कर विभिन्न विषयों पर सार्थक चर्चाएं कर रहे हैं और ऑनलाइन सम्मेलन और कार्यक्रम के भी आयोजन कर रहे हैं। नई तकनीक का विकास के समय की बचत नहीं करता, बल्कि इससे हमें आर्थिक बचत भी हो रही है। साथ ही विश्वस्तरीय ज्ञान संपदा और सुप्रसिद्ध विभूतियों से भी जुड़ने का अवसर मिल जा रहा है। सूचना प्रौद्योगिकी एवं तकनीकी विकास के इस दौर में पूरी दुनिया में ज्ञान विज्ञान का आदान प्रदान व्यापक स्तर पर हो रहा है। आज हमारी पूरी शिक्षा प्रणाली इस नई तकनीकी पर आधारित जा रही है। इस सम्मेलन में वर्ष के लिए कुछ अन्य ज्वलन विषय भी निर्धारित है। मुझे बताया गया है कि विज्ञान में अद्यतन विकास, पर्यावरण की समस्याएं और जलवायु परिवर्तन, नैनो तकनीकी, बौद्धिक संपदा का अधिकार, वैज्ञानिक विज्ञान में नैतिकता और हरित ऊर्जा जैसे महत्वपूर्ण विषयों पर भी इस सम्मेलन में सार्थक एवं ज्ञानवर्धक उपयोगी चर्चाएं होगी। आशा है कि सम्मेलन वैज्ञानिक चिंतन को व्यापक आयाम प्रदान करेगा, तब वैज्ञानिक विकास की प्रक्रिया में मानवीय पहलुओं को भी रेखांकित करने में सफल सिद्ध होगा। राष्ट्रपति दिनकर जी ने अपनी पुस्तक कुरुक्षेत्र में लिखा है, यह समय विज्ञान का सर्वभारपूर्ण समर खुल गए हैं। गुण संस्कृति के गुरु अर्थ विज्ञान की ध्वजा पताका आज सर्वत्र लहरा रही है, जिसके फलस्वरूप मानवीय कल्याण का पद भी प्रकट हुआ। विज्ञान का विषय विज्ञान विकास विश्व मानवता के लिए सदैव वरदान भी साबित हो। हम ये सबका यही प्रयास रहना चाहिए और यह तभी संभव है कि मनुष्य के मस्तिष्क और हृदय और उसकी बुद्धि और भावना का समान रूप से विकास, संतुलित विकास से ही मानवता तृप्त होगी। समग्र पटना विश्वविद्यालय परिवार के विद्वान कुलपति तथा इस आयोजन की सहयोगी ब्रेन्स डेवलपमेंट सोसाइटी को बहुत बहुत बधाइयां। सम्मेलन के प्रतिभागी सभी वैज्ञानिक, विज्ञान शिक्षकों, विशेषज्ञों एवं ऑनलाइन जुड़े सभी छात्र छात्राओं को भी मैं शुभकामनाएं देता हूँ। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
महामहिम का कोटि आभार। अब मैं धन्यवाद ज्ञापन के लिए पटना विश्वविद्यालय के प्रति कुलपति प्रोफेसर अजय कुमार सिंह जी से अनुरोध करती हूँ।
महामहिम कुलाधिपति महोदय या श्री भाई चौहान जी, माननीय कुलपति पटना विश्वविद्यालय प्रोफेसर गिरीश कुमार चौधरी जी, प्रधान सचिव कुलाधिपति कार्यालय आदरणीय श्री चैतन्य प्रसाद जी, बिहार ब्रेन डेवलपमेंट सोसाइटी के ग्लोबल अध्यक्ष आदरणीय श्री विभूति विद्यामोदी, डॉक्टर अनिल काकोडकर जी, प्रोफेसर वीरेंद्र प्रसाद कन्वीनर ऑफ द सोसाइटी, प्रोफेसर कमल कुमार खान ऑर्गेनाइजिंग सेक्रेटरी ऑफ द सोसाइटी, मिस्टर गौरी सिन्हा, वाइस चांसलर ऑफ यूनिवर्सिटी, एवं इस कॉन्फ्रेंस से जुड़े सभी शिक्षक एवं वैज्ञानिक, मैं सबसे पहले सोसाइटी को धन्यवाद देता हूँ, मुझे इस अवसर पर धन्यवाद ज्ञापन का मौका दिया है। इस मौके पर कुछ मैं चर्चा करना चाहूंगा। ये सोसाइटी के काम अभी कॉन्फ्रेंस चल रही है तो काफी सराहनीय है, क्योंकि विज्ञान के प्रति रुचि घटी है ये दिखा गया। और मेरा जो ग्लोबली हम देखें ग्लोबल स्तर पर तो बहुत सैकड़ों वर्ष पहले ईस्टर्न वर्ल्ड जो था ज्ञान का सोर्स था, और वो धीरे धीरे ज्ञान में कमी आई है। ईस्टर्न से ज्ञान डिक्लाइन करके वेस्टर्न वर्ल्ड की तरफ चल गई। इस गिरावट को हमें थोड़ा गिरावट को रोकना है और वो चीज को बढ़ाना है कि बच्चों में फंडामेंटल साइंस की रुचि आए। और जहाँ पे हिस्टोरिकल नॉलेज की बात है तो दही का जमना सर सिंपल केस है, दही का जमना इट इज वेरी क्लासिकल एग्जांपल ऑफ लैब टेक्नोलॉजी। तो जामन जो देते हैं दही में दैट इज पार्ट ऑफ बायोटेक्नोलॉजी। इस तरह से चीजों को हिस्टोरिकल नॉलेज और प्रोजेक्ट साइंस को मिला के हम आगे बढ़ सकते हैं। और इस कड़ी में सर्वप्रथम महामहिम महोदय बिहार जिन्होंने अपने व्यस्तम कार्यक्रम के बावजूद इस कार्यक्रम के लिए अपने समय दिया है, इसके लिए मैं महामहिम पटना विश्वविद्यालय सोसाइटी और अपने तरफ से तहे दिल से आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। मैं माननीय कुलपति महोदय पटना विश्वविद्यालय का भी आभारी हूँ जिन्होंने इस कार्यक्रम में अपना कीमती समय निकाला। मैं कुलाधिपति कार्यालय के प्रधान सचिव और सभी सचिवों एवं पदाधिकारियों का पटना विश्वविद्यालय सोसाइटी और अपने तरफ से इस कार्यक्रम में शिरकत करने के लिए मैं सोसाइटी के ग्लोबल अध्यक्ष विक्रमादित्य जी, आनंद काकोडकर जी और रुद्रावी सिन्हा जी को अपने पटना विश्वविद्यालय की तरफ से धन्यवाद देता हूँ। विशेष रूप से डॉक्टर विजय प्रसाद कन्वेनर और परिंदर कुमार खान और रैंक सेक्रेटरी जो इस कार्यक्रम को आयोजित करने में अपना बहुमूल्य योगदान दिया है, उनको भी धन्यवाद देता हूँ। अंत में सारे डेलीगेट्स सभी कार्यकर्ताओं पर प्रत्यक्ष और परोक्ष रूप से इस कार्यक्रम में जुड़े हुए सभी को बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
अब मैं आप सबों से अनुरोध करूंगी कि राष्ट्रगान के लिए कृपया अपने स्थान पर खड़े हो।
पंजाब सिंध गुजरात
अब तो कार्यक्रम की स्पीकर जो उनका महामहिम आप लोगों को ऑनलाइन
वीकेंड के चेयरमैन श्री विभूति विक्रमादित्य जी से अनुरोध करूंगी कि कार्यक्रम की आगे की रूपरेखा से अवगत कराएं।
I'm grateful that I have been selected to say a few words about Padma Vibhushan Dr. Anil Kapoor. He is a famous nuclear scientist of India and has been instrumental in India's nuclear program. He was amongst the chosen few involved in the first peaceful nuclear explosion experiment that India conducted on May 18, 1974 at Pokhran. Later, he played a key role in the series of successful nuclear tests conducted during May 1998, again at India at Pokhran. India has demonstrated a nuclear submarine power-back technology under Kapoor's leadership. At present, he is the chairman of the Rajiv Gandhi Science Technology Commission from India. He was the director of BARC in the year 1996 and was the chairman of Atomic Energy Commission and secretary to the Government of India. Department of Atomic Energy during the year 2000 to 2009. He was DAE, Dr. Homi Bhabha Chair Professor during 2010 to January 2015 and INA Peace Government Chair of Engineering Events during January 2015 to 2017. Kapoor has worked for the development of atomic energy program in India throughout his professional life. Focus of his work has been on self-reliant development of nuclear reactor system to address the India program requirements. And deterred by restrictions imposed by the international community, he succeeded in developing various systems for pressurizing heavy water reactor in building the Dhruva reactor, starting from the conceptual stage in rehabilitation of Madras Atomic Power Station. Units 1 and 2 of which at one stage appeared to be on the verge of a written off following the failure of the moderator India manifolds. In conceptualization and development of advanced heavy water reactor that realizes the next generation objective through the innovative configuration of present day technology besides the use of thorium and such other techniques. Utilization of our vast thorium resources for energy production has received a special attention under Kapoor's leadership. He has created a roadmap for shaping the third stage of India's nuclear program, aimed at taking the vast energy potential of our thorium resources, not only the source of electricity production, but also as a primary source for other forms of energy use. A number of new technology areas such as accelerator, different systems, high temperature reactors materials, and recycling technology, etc. have been manipulated for this purpose. Kapoor continued to be actively involved in the program related to augmentation of thorium utilization in our nuclear power program and for development of non-fossil primary energy sources for meeting our overall needs. I thank Dr. Kapoor and I will say that now he will have a lecture on this topic of knowledge. Thank you.
Now I invite Padma Vibhushan Professor Anil Kapoor for keynote address. Sir, you are requested to unmute your mic.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
धन्यवाद. My PPT presentation, can somebody operate from the host end?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Visible, sir?
Yeah. Thank you. Professor Girish Kumar Chaudhary, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Patna University. Dr. Vibhuti Vikramaditya, Chairman B-Brains Development Society. Professor Prabhat Ranjan, Vice Chancellor D.Y. Patil International University, Professor Dolly Sinha, Pro Vice Chancellor, Ellen Mithila University and Chairperson of this 8th Bihar Science Conference 2019, Professor Ajay Kumar Singh, Pro Vice Chancellor, Patna University, Professor Birendra Kumar, Convener, 8th Bihar Science Conference 2009, all distinguished participants, invitees who are participating in this conference organized by Patna University and B Brains Development Society, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a great privilege for me to be kind of associated with this conference, which has brought together the entire scientific community from Bihar, and I think you are discussing a wide range of subjects, disciplines, with the aim of leveraging basic sciences for national development. So it is in that context that I have selected this topic for the present lecture, getting ready for knowledge era. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. Now, India has a great heritage with regard to the knowledge domain, uh, kind of pushing the frontiers of knowledge and also application of knowledge. Now, and Bihar has been particularly connected with the India's knowledge movement. We all remember the ancient Nalanda, how it was a preeminent university from global standards in those days. And what I'm going to talk about today is to draw your attention to this fact that we are transitioned from agrarian era to industrial era, and now we are transitioning from industrial era to knowledge. Can we ask others to unmute? There is a lot of background noise. So we are now transitioning from industrial era to knowledge era. And I want to put it across to you, and I'll show that with a set of slides, how we need to catch up. Although we have a great heritage in the context of, knowledge domain, I think there are some very large sounds coming. For example, in the agrarian era, if you can look at that bar chart, which shows the relative GDP of different countries at different points of time. And in agrarian era, you could notice that India's GDP was among the largest in the world. In fact, the largest in the world. Then came the industrial era, somewhere around 1700 or a little later than 1700. And then you would notice that India's relative GDP started declining. And moreover, many other started countries started kind of coming on the scene. Their GDP increased because they were able to do much better in the opportunities presented by the industrial era. Now, this chart comes up to fairly recent time, and you would notice that India's GDP kept on decreasing, but post independence, it has relatively started rising. And as we know, that particularly in dollar purchase parity terms, India today is number three economy in the world. But what we need to recognize is is a depiction of an aggregate situation. What we should look at, because we have to look at the quality of life of average Indians, and quality of life of average Indians is better measured by per capita income rather than the overall national income or overall GDP. And in that context, all of you will agree with me that we have miles to go. Now, as I said earlier, we are now entering the knowledge era. And India is a country with a huge demographic dividend. You know, we have been blessed with a very large youth population. And we know, even for a IT, which is not quite knowledge, just information, but in IT era, how the youth, Indian youth, could do wonders and make a global impact. Now, the question is, if we are able to do capacity building of Indian youth, both in our cities as well as our villages, and I'm stressing on villages because larger number of youth live in villages. And so, if you do proper capacity building of these youth, then I think there is no stopping about the Indian economic growth, even in per capita income terms, in the knowledge era. And just to kind of stress this point a little more, we know that our GDP, we talk about three broad segments: the agriculture segment, the manufacturing segment, and the service sector segment. And we also know that today, service sector segment constitutes the largest contributor to India's economy. And now, the dimensions of service sector itself are kind of expanding like never before. As I said, we are going from information to knowledge, and hopefully we'll go back to our old Indian heritage of wisdom. Now, around that, apart from the knowledge for knowledge sake, a lot of economy elements or elements which can contribute to economy can be built up. We talk about artificial intelligence, we talk about large big data. Now, big data, you can't have a country other than India which can contribute to such huge data. So, any artificial intelligence development or tool can really flourish by India's participation. And that actually is happening. Many advanced countries in the world, they do use us to kind of validate their development, their tools. But many times the grassroots Indian youth are left out of this process. And I think we need to turn the dimensions or complexion of the knowledge activities in the country in a manner that we leverage Indian youth across the board, and that is what will make a huge difference to the country. And that, I think, is the central message that I want to deliver in this meeting. Now, I want to elaborate this point further, and for that, can we go to the next slide? Next slide, please. Yes. Now, see, this slide is a rather busy slide, and don't bother about the details, but it actually looks at the R&D expenditure of different countries in the context of the total GDP of the country, as well as in the context of the number of science technology equivalent, full-time equivalents in the country as a fraction of the country's population. Now, without going too much into the details of that figure, let me come to the messages that come out of this figure. I think the central message is we need to make our research and development investments more productive than they are at present. Actually, you will be surprised, but India's R&D expenditure is actually larger than Israel, larger than Canada, larger than Sweden, larger than United Kingdom, larger than Switzerland, larger than Finland, and a few other countries. Now, you would recognize that I am naming these countries in preference to the United States and China because they spend much more than us. And so, if they have better technologies or more comprehensive technology, or they do larger global trade on the basis of that, is understandable. But these countries which I am naming, they actually do larger technology trade, technology development than India. You would recognize you have a lot of technology products from these countries which are operational in India. Now, in contrast, if you ask a question, if we are spending more money on R&D compared to these countries, then more of our technology products should be going to these countries rather than, in comparison with the technology products that we see uh, from these countries in India. And you will agree with me that is not the case. And that is where the aspect of efficiency of utilization of our investment comes in. There is another dimension to this. Many times one feels that no, India is a large country. We have to cater to too many people. So our resources might be getting spread very thin. Not true. The per full-time equivalent spending in India is not small. It is actually comparable to some of the best in the world. Now, and certainly we need to spend more. We often talk about what is our R&D expenditure as a percentage of GDP, and that decidedly is very small, 0.8, 0.7%, somewhere there. And we always, every science conference, science congress, we have this articulation that it should go up to 2%. And it's nowhere close to that at this moment. And it's actually not increasing in a significant measure. Why is that? I think one is the number take to science should be larger. Now, we may have a large pool, but India is a large country. So the full-time equivalent per million population in India should be comparable with some of the advanced countries. And that is one area where our R&D spend should go up. Even more important is the industry investment. Industry investment is very low in our country. It is growing, but it is still quite low. And so we need to create a confidence. Industry today has no confidence that if they invest in R&D in our laboratories, we will produce adequate return from them, because the industry has to survive on return on investment. And it is in that context that we need to create conditions where there is confidence building measure between industry and R&D institutions, and so that you can create that confidence for industry to invest in R&D. And that, I think, is a cultural problem. More to be done at the scientific community level. Also, something is to be done at the level of government, and I'll come to that. So, there is an urgent need to evolve and nurture conducive innovation ecosystems and respond to technology development demands. This needs a mindset change across all domains: the society, academia, research institutions, industry, bureaucracy, political and policy organs, and so on. So, I want to talk about them one by one. And can we go to the next slide, please? Now, in this slide, we're talking about drivers for competitive. No, I said that we do a lot of research. In fact, in the context of science technology indicators, which are published by Department of Science and Technology every year, you would find that India is doing quite well. In fact, in terms of publication record or the growth of publications, quality publication from India is about the fastest in the world. So we are doing quite well in term, but in spite of that, we have miles to cover. And of course, in terms of technology, we still have serious challenge. So the drivers for competitive research, and I also want to talk about what should we understand by competitive research? Just publications, or it is something more? And it is in that context that I think this figure, which it's an old figure. I think it was published in a book in 1997, uh, Pasteur's Quadrant, the basic science and technology innovation. Now, this diagram, if you divide the space, total space of our R&D activities, we can look at it in the context of a vertical axis, which is quest for fundamental understanding, because that is what research is about. And on the horizontal axis, we kind of look at it in the context of consideration for use. Anything that we do, how it has make a difference to the society, to individuals, to the market at large. And that, uh, you would agree with me, is an important aspect of science and technology, because the whole evolution of humanities and how we have created amenities for ourselves, exploited resources, perhaps a bit too much, but it is all based on science and technology. So there is a basic component of scientific research, and there is an applied component of scientific research. So if you concentrate now on the top left hand quadrant, uh, which should be very high on quest for fundamental knowledge, but we don't really bother about whether it is useful or not. Some very aspects of very fundamental science are like that. And so this in this book, the author calls it Bohr's quadrant, because Bohr's scientific research, pure basic research, was of that category. It develops applications, not that it doesn't develop, it develops application, but it develops applications much later. When the discovery is made, it's not clear what kind of application it can be put to. So this is essentially curiosity driven, pure voyage to discovery. And let's call it Bohr's quadrant. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. Now, let's go to the next quadrant, that is the top right quadrant. Now that top right quadrant is, it has been titled as Pasture's quadrant because Pasture's research can be described as user-inspired basic research. Now, his work was still basic research, but it had tremendous utility and it was meant for solving some practical problem. So essentially, we are talking about work that locates the center of research in an area of basic scientific ignorance that lies at the heart of a social problem. And you will agree with me if you're talking, there are a large number of areas which need attention in this context. Now, so this is research which is very high in terms of quest for fundamental understanding, but also very high in terms of consideration for use. Let's now go to the third quadrant, which is the right bottom quadrant, which is the pure applied research, and it is being called Edison's quadrant. And it's actually inventor driven to solve a practical problem, whether it contributes to a basic understanding or not, or basic knowledge or not, is besides the point, but it solves a practical problem. And so, Edison's work, particularly the incandescent lamp, was of that category, and this is also equally important. Now, as long as we have work located in these three quadrants, I think everything is useful. But look at that fourth quadrant, the bottom left hand side quadrant, which is, it is neither a big contributor to quest for fundamental understanding nor has any practical utility. So the author calls that science that goes nowhere. And so end goal other than curiosity or application. In Indian context, we'll say end goal could be that we have a UGC requirement of so many papers before you get a promotion. Now, such kind of end goals, that doesn't take science anywhere. And so the author says that he calls it science to nowhere and he puts a big cross on it. And on the other hand, I think the aim should be that we should focus research to the maximum extent in Pasture's quadrant. And even if you are doing work in Bohr's quadrant, which is important, we should see whether we can shift that work or result of that work into Pasture's quadrant, as well as if you are in the Edison's quadrant, we should see whether we can shift that work or results of that work or the corresponding basic science related to that work into Pasture's quadrant. And so our aim should be to do research which is consistent with what appears to be the attributes of Pasture's quadrant. And if you do that, you will find the Indian research will get greater and greater cutting edge. And I think this, I'm not saying that it is not there, but this is very, very minimal. And that is why Indian competitiveness, to my mind, is not at the level that one would desire. Can we go to the next slide, please? Next slide. Yeah. So what I said just now was one big cultural change that we must bring in our research and development. Now there is still a question, we have to choose a problem when we want to carry out research and development. And when we want to choose a problem to carry out research and development, I think it should be done on the basis of what is a problem that is required to be solved. Today, I think a large amount of research is based on what is a problem that can be solved in a period of whatever time it requires to complete your dissertation, master's or PhD or whatever, or publication, achieve so many publication record. So you may have huge publication record, but it doesn't qualify for what I said earlier, then the Indian science doesn't become very competitive. People say, yeah, there is a huge knowledge addition, but trivial knowledge addition, which I think doesn't take you. So, how do you identify these problems? And there are many ways of doing that. From my perspective, I would say we simply look at the India's export import uh, items. What are the major items of Indian imports and what are the major items of Indian exports? And you will find, I would normally imagine that India would import raw materials which it does not have and carries out value addition and exports. India will not import raw materials which it has, and it will do value addition on its raw materials and export. And India will export finished goods more than raw materials. And only those goods which were not yet developed or doesn't make economic sense to kind of build in the country, those we import. But if you look at this list, this is actually dated, but you can do search Google to prepare your own list. And you would find that top items of import and top items of export almost overlap. And that is not a good thing for our country, except for three items, that is vehicles, pharmaceuticals, and clothing. These are the three items where Indian exports are actually more than imports. And that is a good example of what is being done. Although one may ask, you must examine how much of it is because of R&D done by public funded institutions and how much of it is because of R&D done by industry. And so I come back to the point that industry investments, wherever industry has invested in R&D here, unfortunately, most of it in its own institutions, they have produced results. Now, we must get the industry interested in the larger R&D ecosystem of the country. Then results. Today, that is not the case. Most of the other areas, you will find that India's imports are actually far exceeding. For example, you take iron and steel. India is this, lot of heritage, tremendous capability, tremendous resource, but our import is much more than export. Why is it? Why is it so? Or so like that, I think we must. So wherever we are unable to export, see, many cases we are unable to export because we are not competitive, and we are not competitive because our R&D inputs have not addressed all issues that go to make a competitive product. And I think one should choose the problem to address using a consideration of this kind. There may be also other issues. There may be strategic issues. There may be a specific problem sector by sector, state by state, region by region. And I think we should choose problems from, which get thrown up in that context. Next one, please. Next one. Yeah. Now, I'm so happy that Professor Prabhat Ranjan is here in this conference. In fact, he is the reason why I I am here with you. But we were together in TIFAC, and at that time we brought out this document, Technology Vision 2035. This is a big document, and that document is divided in 12 sectors. And this is just one page corresponding to one sector, education. But there is a section on materials. There is a section on habitat. There is a section on safe drinking water and air. Like that, electronics, transportation, everything. The entire spectrum is covered. Now, I have education because, and I'll come to that in a minute. But this document addresses what are all the emerging areas, emerging trends and concepts which are emerging, and where one needs to work. It also talks about what is the state of play. Something may be ready for implementation, something may require some R&D to make it implementable. Something may be just in imagination requiring blue sky research. And but there are this host of technologies, and then we must leverage these kind of emerging concepts, emerging trends, and make sure that we are up to date on the future technologies, because that is where the world is moving. I picked up this chapter or this section on education because we are talking about, as I said in the beginning, I talked about empowering Indian youth. And if you want to empower Indian youth, we have a huge gap to cover between an average Indian youth and an average youth in advanced countries. And in that, we should include many of our Indians who are learning there, studying there. Now, I think there is a need that we bring our Indian youth on par with the best of education which people in advanced countries are receiving today, and that itself is going forward, particularly in the domain of education. And we have a bigger challenge. India, our economy is growing, but our disparities are also growing. And I'm not going deep in that because today is not a topic to discuss disparities. But one of the key to avoid or eliminate disparities is education. And you would agree with me that between cities and villages, again, there is a huge disparity. And of course, the primary cause is that there is a disparity in the education facilities that we have. Now, of course, we have a problem of numbers, we have problem of resources. Now, if you want to deal with numbers, also deal with large numbers and deliver quality education, uh, I think you have to take recourse to technology. Now I'm talking about education technologies. And while there is uh, a great importance to face-to-face face-to-face teaching learning process, or the mentoring by our own teachers, there is actually no substitute. But the question is, we have to also handle a very large student-teacher ratio, and that is where technology comes in handy. Unfortunately, I don't have too much of time to devote, but it is important that we leverage technology to achieve this change, bridging this divide between urban and rural India, well, in the context of education and through education in the context of economic uh, conditions that exist. I'm very glad I'm also associated with a knowledge company called Maharashtra Knowledge Corporation Limited. I chair that corporation. Now, this is of course like any other IT company, but it's a company with a social transformation agenda, and it has done a lot and it has developed a lot of products. And I am very happy to inform, some of you may know, but there is actually a major skill development mission for young people in operation in Bihar, in which MKCL is participating in a big way. But the point I want to stress is the power of technology must be leveraged to do the education, learning, skilling process on a mass scale. And because we need to, we cannot keep on trailing, because if we keep on trailing, the world is very competitive and not very everybody looks at their own interests, and we will be continuously driven behind. And so we need to leapfrog in education and technology, and that's why I'm stressing some time on this slide. Next one, please. Next one. I think you can skip this slide. Go to the next one. Now, the important thing is how do you do this, research which has of high technology significance, or how do you address a problem uh, which has very high need or very high impact. Now, to understand that, I have kind of borrowed this slide from the University of Tokyo. Now, if you focus on the bottom half of this slide, it talks about university, then below that, individual research, and that's what the academia comprises. Now, you will find that the situation in India, Indian universities and foreign universities is more or less the same. So many of us, when we go abroad, we look at this and we think, yeah, they are the same, but then we are not able to achieve the same result because we sort of ignore what exists in the upper half of this slide, which is actually most of the universities in India. This is missing, and that is what we need to bring in because a university has to be, of course, has to have academia, a big peer group of academia within itself, and also should be connected with the larger academic peer group. But university also has to be connected with the industry and society. And just as you would have problems from different disciplines as a part of knowledge exercise, pushing the frontiers of those disciplines. You have to also look at problems which industry or the society throws up, and those are not aligned with disciplines. They are aligned with the problems that industry faces. So you need to bring different disciplines to leverage on solution to that problem, and so the research to address those problems invariably becomes a group activity. We talk about a lot of multidisciplinary research, but when we talk about multidisciplinary, we talk about a physicist interacting with chemist and look at a problem on the interface of two disciplines, which is important. But it still does not address the problem of society, because problem of society, as I said, you have to identify which are all the disciplines that you need to bring on to leverage on that problem solution. And then and this is not restricted to only science and technology. It can go to humanities, it can go to liberal arts, it can go to economics, it can go to management, and so on and so forth. And so the composition of these groups has to be done differently, and there has to be this education sharing. If you see on the extreme right hand side, there is a bar. The top is 100% industry and the bottom is 100% university, and in between there is an education sharing, graded sharing, and this should be an important complexion in all our universities, and we must emphasize group research. And if you do that, then I think there could be a significant difference in the quality of research that we do. Can we go to the next slide? Next slide, please. Yes. Now, when you talk about such group research, you obviously talk about people who are not like, they they are not similar. The characteristics of people working in basic science discipline and people working the science but engineering, their mindsets are quite different, their requirements are quite different, their output is not necessarily identical. Now, you want a diverse set of people to participate in group research. You must have all of them working together. And then the question is, how do we evaluate their contribution? If you say that I will evaluate all contribution on the basis of the papers, because those are the present yardsticks for promotion, you will never have good contribution coming from an engineer or an applied scientist, and you would use them more as service people, and that will never allow you to solve the problem on one side and not take that applied science to a very high level of excellence. Now, on the other hand, if you are now an engineering institution and you do recognize everything on the basis of the the value system which is relevant to such people, and then you have, because you then you will always be doing incremental work. You will never do the disruptive technology because that requires out of box thinking, that requires some new phenomena which may have been discovered recently to be brought in. Now this requires people who are engaged in fundamental research, and if you now say that I will ask somebody who is in fundamental science, you tell me how many patents you have taken, tell me how many products you have created, what is the level of commercialization, that also is not good. So my you need a yardstick which is flexible, which recognizes everything which is consistent with the institutional mandate, and it is not kind of sharply weighed down on one side or the other. There must be respect. Every that's what Mahatma Gandhi said. Even sweeping is important. He himself used to sweep while he was dealing major international challenges or domestic challenges. So, to my mind, and of course, let me tell you a bit about why co-working. I already said group research, but why such co-working is important. So at the bottom of this figure, you have three figures which are also from the same technology vision 2035 document. And so take the case of transportation, particularly. So the two figures at the corners, left corner and the right corner, are actually for the the rail transport. The right hand bottom is the high speed bullet train. The bottom left corner is the maglev, magnetic levitation based train, maglev train. And on the side, I have put characteristics of, on the left hand side, fundamental research institution, on the right hand side, applied research institution. Now, if you are in an applied research institution, they also improve technology. And let's say you have current technology for railways and you have a railway development institute, something like that. It will evolve. It will keep on. And, Indian railways also are improving and evolving. But this will be improving an existing product. And this development will be at best evolutionary, which is important. Now look at the left hand side. We're talking about fundamental research. Their focus is pushing frontiers of knowledge. Now, suddenly, if such research is also has an atmosphere of shaking hand with application domain, then you can bring out some new innovative products. If I had to give an example, India is so strong on material science, and I think on basic research plane, Indian capability is comparable with the best in the world. But we missed the microelectronics revolution completely. We missed the quantum, the devices based on quantum dots, quantum wells completely, and we are importing all of them. And in fact, many of us, even in basic research, we demonstrate these institutes, these devices with great pride as our resource. Sometimes people say, Raman effect was invented in India, but if it's a Raman spectrometer, most probably we import. Now, why can't such things be made right in India? So, talking about this railway example, let us say in fundamental research, you have a some group working on electromagnetics. And that group, I put it to you, is in a better position to talk about maglev development than people who are doing the mechanical transmission for railways. And so I think, but you must have people who can translate in fundamental research institutions, and you must have people who can bring in the latest in fundamental research in applied research institutions. And it is only then that you can, progressing on evolutionary path is extremely important. Most of the progress is on evolutionary path, but out of box development, creating disruptive technologies, because they create inflection, and that is equally important or maybe more important. And moreover, talking about transportation, at that time we also talked about whether one can have a flying car. We are used to road transport, we are used to air transport, but can we visualize a flying car? And in fact, this was being talked, and before the report was printed and published, in fact, people had started proof of concept of such ideas. And today, if you go to Google, you will find several examples of doing this. Now, in ability to do this, which you will agree, culturally, we have miles to go to be able to do this, and to ability to do this depends on what kind of values we nurture. Today, we nurture values which will actually kill these kind of things. So, institutional values and yardstick for measuring excellence, they are actually interlinked, and we should create uh, a measuring yardstick which is based on weighted impact on peers in the core area being pursued. So that talks about publication, impact on downstream partners. If I have done something, I must have somebody to take the relay race forward to carry out this development. And any applied research individual must have a downstream partner. Otherwise, you can't say I'm doing applied research there is no downstream partner. And most importantly, impact on the society and industry, not just by exciting people that look, India is kind of, we have many scientists who are abroad, they have done great research, so they are Indians, so we are happy. We are happy. But I think we should have such people here, right on Indian soil. Now, this we need to create, and these weightages should be determined through an understanding between individual and institution. You cannot make a straight-jacketed thing, because individual interests are very important and they must be taken into account. And this is another area of learning which our research institutions and academic institutions must actually make progress. Next slide, please. Now, when the research translation is not very easy. Many times we feel that we have done some development. Children many times get into the mode that I have created some proof of concept experiment. I'm showing that it works in the lab, and I feel that I have developed technology. We must realize that translation of from proof of concept, where the technology readiness level is quite low, to a product which can make impact on the marketplace, where the technology readiness level must be at a very high level, TRL 9 or something. Now, this translation involves a lot of effort. And in fact, many people define different valleys of death at different stages of this translation. I have only identified 3, but you could also talk about other valleys of death. And this is an area which has not been attended. So we have many times exhibition, somebody gets an idea and say, I have a great idea. It never sees the light of the day. You take that idea to an industry, they will say, no, I will go abroad and get that technology. It is because we are not paying attention to this translation chain. Now, research to translate an idea into prototype uh, is one thing which happens in the laboratory, and this obviously I think industry can do it itself, but this is primarily a public funded research objective. It should be funded, broad based research, because you never know whether it will go forward or not. And you go to somewhat little better, you go beyond TRL 1. Now you're talking about development. From the prototype, you need to create a model which which can go to manufacturing stage. Now this development is actually a bigger exercise. And many times you will find that public funded efforts will not allow this kind of funding that is required. These have to be normally done together in academia industry partnership with an additional government funding. So a public private partnership model. For example, the models we have in the form of technology development board or BIRAC or so, these are all institutions which can support these kind of activities, but recognize our resources that we spend on these efforts are actually small compared to what is required. And I would imagine that we should scale it up by at least an order of magnitude, if not couple of orders of magnitude, to make a big thing. And that's one change that we need to do. Having reached the manufacturing stage, it still doesn't go to the real life use, because many things you make the first product, it still fails, because there is that aspect of user acceptance. There is the market thing. There are many, we know many products which were very good but they failed in the market, and so there is a lot of effort in bridging that gap, and that is primarily the job of industry. So if you create an ecosystem where all these things are done with synergy, I think India will certainly do much more. Things are changing, but I think changing rather slowly, and the world is not waiting for us. World is moving much faster. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. Now, just to what is in this table, this is actually a study done by National Foundation for American Policy, and the study is titled Immigration and Billion Dollar Startups, NFAP Policy Brief. It was brought out in 2016. Now it says that it's an American study. So the immigrants who have come to America from different countries, and it looked at the number of billion dollar startup companies created by such immigrant founders. And that study actually revealed that India is on top of that list, 14, compared to many other countries. Now, we've been examining what is it that we need to do in India to make it competitive and all. We have been talking about how to improve the situation with respect to education. But the fact is that whatever we have, many of our students, the brighter students, they go abroad, and these immigrant founders of billion dollar startups are within some of those bright students who have gone abroad, and there they can flourish, and India can become number one country in United States in this respect. So I think it only tells you that there is something beyond just education and research laboratory environment, which is important for creating that economic impact. And that, of course, is a matter more for the policy makers in the government, as well as to bridge this relationship between public and private. But I'll leave it at that. But I want to just draw attention to this dimension, that there is a much bigger aspect which is outside the S&T domain or education domain, which also needs to be attended. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? I think let us skip this next one. Yeah. Now I want to spend another 5 minutes. My time is almost getting up. So another 5 minutes I want to spend in terms of talking about villages. As I said, 2/3 of India lives in villages, and we talk about village economy. We must recognize that village economy, of course, it consists of agriculture, but there is a large amount of very small land ownership, maybe an acre or smaller than that, or even 2 acres. Now that size of piece of land, it does not support the livelihood of a family purely on agriculture. So why, and the number of households on an India-wide survey, the number of households which can actually make a living out of agriculture is around 30%. 30% of the rural households. So we have to deal with 70% of the household in rural areas about their income. So now allied activities in agriculture, of course, there is a big emphasis there. Then, there are 50% people who do not have any land at all, and they are working as daily casual labor or some such thing. So, I think we should also focus on non-agriculture activities which can contribute to income of rural people. And now, as I said in the beginning, we are in digital era, and we know that in the service sector or in leveraging the tools of knowledge era, if you do capacity building of youth, we can actually contribute to the economic growth of rural sector, just as the same way as IT has done in the context of IT revolution and the economic benefit India got. So, so I think we need to focus on capacity building of rural youth, including school children, uh, in the context of the digital age, so that they become empowered to leverage opportunities of digital age, contribute to the service sector income. They can also contribute to knowledge leveraging on agriculture or knowledge leveraging on manufacture, because today these are all possible. You can have decentralized manufacture, some of it can be in villages. So if you do that, then I see no reason why the average income in villages, why talk about making it double? It can be 4 or 5 times. So, and we can catch on if we particularly focus on villages in preference, then we can catch on and bridge the urban rural divide. As the urban income improves, see today urban income is roughly twice that of rural income. Urban income will grow, rural income will grow, but we must accelerate the growth of rural income and bridge the gap between urban and rural India. And similarly, we must accelerate the growth of Indian income and bridge the gap between India and the best in the world. And if you want to do that, just like we talk about an innovation ecosystem in the modern sense, in the context of cities, we should talk about an innovation ecosystem in villages. What is it that can be done? And this is what you see in the figure is an experiment that is currently, we're doing it, in fact, at 3 locations in Maharashtra. And the idea is that you connect a knowledge institution, preferably a university which is existing in a rural setting. If it is not existing, create a university in a rural setting and create some facilities for technology demonstration where the local people can see and leverage those technologies for their own livelihood. Similarly, engage with school children using modern technologies and make them competent to leverage opportunities of knowledge era, and then sort of expose them to opportunities which exist right in villages. And if you do that, then you can of course grow the agricultural income, but you can grow other income. And this is the concept which I call sillage, because you must create city like opportunities in villages in the context of knowledge empowerment. Next one. Next one. Next slide, please. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, good. So I'm on the last slide now, and I let us look at three pillars or three domains: society, economy, and knowledge. And as I said, India has a great tradition in knowledge, but going forward, I'm sure it was not there when India was a real knowledge superpower in that sense. But going forward, somehow the all knowledge activities, the form has remained, substance has largely vanished. And this knowledge domain has not been engaging with society and economy as much as it should. Now, society and economy, they have to engage with each other because it has to do with the livelihood of people. Everybody has to survive, they have to earn. So there is that linkage. But in absence of knowledge linkage, the society economy linkage is essentially transactional. Trade. I get something from X, sell it to Y, and then Y gets it from me and sells it Z. And this transactional society uh, is what has flourished. In fact, the transaction has to be there everywhere, so it is there everywhere, all over the world. But by and large, transactional. Imagine that knowledge starts engaging with society and economy in a very deep sense. Then part of that transactional mindset or transactional activities, they actually get converted into entrepreneurial activity, creating something, new creation of new value. And that uh, actually changes the society from a trader's mindset to a society which is wiser, society consisting of enlightened people, society which has values. And it is my hunch, a strong hunch at that, that if you do that, then not only technology will flourish, because now you are creating technology to solve problems of the society, economy. So technology products will become more competitive, but will also become a wiser society, a society of values. And the degeneration that we in society will not be of the kind that we see today. So I think moving towards knowledge society or knowledge domain is of crucial interest to India, and the responsibility for achieving that, to my mind, primarily is on our universities and research institutions. And we must together strive to create the necessary cultural transition uh, to realize our ambition. I wish all of you great success in doing so, and let's hope that this 8th Bihar Science Conference makes its own contribution in that direction. Thank you very much.
Sir, for enlightening us with such an informative and guiding light of knowledge. With this keynote address, we are concluding the inaugural session. To join technical sessions, kindly switch over to the link provided. Enhance and share your knowledge. Stay healthy, stay safe. Have a nice day.
Thank you.